He sat alone by the window, thin and silent, poking at his untouched breakfast. On his wrist, a worn-out tattoo, a dagger slashed across an anchor. At the center of the diner, a group of men chuckled. "Bet he inked that himself," one smirked. "No real vet sits alone without showing a badge," another scoffed. A waitress froze. The manager stepped in, polite but cold, asking the old man to move outside. He was making the customers uneasy. So he stood up, balancing a tray, a cane, and whatever pride hadn't already been stripped from him. But just then, a young Navy SEAL walked in. His eyes caught the tattoo. And suddenly, silence. This is what happened next, and why the entire town would never forget his name. Welcome to Unboxed Story, where acts of quiet courage and kindness come to life. Let's rewind to what unfolded that Sunday morning. The day had its own rhythm at Grant's Diner. By 8:30, booths filled quickly. Retired folks, early churchgoers, and regulars who never needed a menu. The scent of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee hung in the air, layered over the soft clink of silverware and faint country songs from a dusty old speaker. It was Veterans Discount Day, half off for those who'd served. Signs on every window made it clear. A small flag pin rested at the hostess stand. One table had already cleared their plates and swapped war tales. Some true, most exaggerated. In the back corner, next to the glowing red exit sign, sat a frail man with snow-white hair, a battered brown coat, and a metal prosthetic leg that peeked from under worn jeans. His name was Walter Reed. No medals, no ball cap, no unit insignias. He'd only spoken to order the special, scrambled eggs, toast, no substitutions. He always sat alone. Always. From my spot behind the counter, towel over my shoulder, I could see the way he clutched his glass, both hands wrapped around it like it was the last stable thing in his world. But what drew the most attention wasn't his quiet. It was the tattoo, faded, stretched by time, resting on his left wrist. A dagger through an anchor. Not stylish, not modern. The kind of mark you'd expect from a barracks backroom, long before social media captured every moment. 4 men in their late 40s wearing identical golf jackets sat center stage. One spotted Walter first and nudged the others. "Bet that ink came from a dare," he snorted. "Who's ever heard of a vet without ID?" They laughed. Not loud, just enough. I froze at the counter. I didn't know Walter's past. None of us did. But every year, same day, same seat, same order. Always left a single dollar tip. Then vanished. He never asked for attention. Maybe that's why it stung to see him ridiculed. He didn't react, didn't flinch. His eyes never left the glass. But his lips were tight, like he was holding something in. Not tears, not sadness. Something deeper. Then Todd, the manager, clipboard in hand, forced a smile and leaned in. "Sir," he said, too formal to be kind, "we've had a few concerns. Some guests are uncomfortable. Would you mind sitting on the patio instead?" The diner didn't fall silent, but something shifted, a tension in the air. Walter gave a tiny nod. Not in agreement, but resignation. Like he'd heard this line too many times. He stood balancing his tray and cane. Each step was a struggle, his prosthetic clicking with every inch. As he passed the men's booth, one raised his mug. "If he's a SEAL," he laughed, "then I'm the president." They howled. A single tear slid down Walter's face, hit the tile, and no one said a word. Todd turned away, didn't intervene. Walter reached the door, wrestled it open, and stepped into the autumn chill. Wind slapped his face. He blinked hard, shuffled to a patio table, and sat. One hand on his cane, the other lowering a plate of cold eggs. Inside, life resumed. Coffee refills, quiet chatter. The same men laughed again, softer now, still smug. I stood there. High school job. Trained to smile, pour coffee, avoid conflict. But that moment stuck like a lump in my throat. I kept glancing at the window. Walter was out there. Alone. shoulders bowed, his coffee only steaming because of the cold wind. Not invisible. People saw him, they just didn't see him. Then, at exactly 8:46 a.m., the bell over the door jingled. In walked a man in a black jacket, fresh haircut, straight posture, mid to late 20s, no smile, just presence. He scanned the room. His gaze stopped at the empty seat Walter had left, then shifted to the window. He saw it. The tattoo. Faint but unmistakable, he froze. Jaw clenched, breath caught. And the diner fell silent like someone cut the power. Because this wasn't just recognition. This was reverence. He saw not a faded tattoo, but a symbol. A legacy. A brotherhood few would ever understand. And he was about to make sure everyone did. Walter slowly raised his eyes, puzzled. A gust of wind tugged at his coat, lifting just enough to reveal the tattoo in full. Jackson's voice trembled ever so slightly. G7, sir. You're the one they tell us about during training. Walter blinked, stunned. His mouth opened, but no words came. He gripped his cane tighter. Then, finally, a small nod. Jackson didn't drop his salute. His voice lowered, but still rang with respect. May I sit, sir? Walter gestured to the empty seat. Of course, son. Jackson lowered his arm and took the seat, rigid, hands shaking slightly. Inside the diner, not a soul moved. Not the servers, not the customers. Even the 4 men at the center booth, the ones who'd laughed, sat in stiff silence. Todd, the manager, stood frozen mid-step, face pale. And I stood behind the counter, my heart pounding like a drum. Because that name? Walter Reed of G7? That wasn't just a name. It was a whispered legend in the SEAL world. My grandfather, James Harrington, used to tell me stories at bedtime. Tales that didn't feel made up, but felt like memories. And in every story, there was always a quiet man with a tattoo on his wrist. A man who never boasted, but always got his brothers home. I never thought I'd see him in real life. But here he was, just outside the window as the clouds gathered again, and a younger soldier sat across from him as if in the presence of a king. Jackson turned slightly in his chair so we could all hear him. This man designed the extractions we still use. He wrote the book on field supply drops. That tattoo wasn't bought, it was earned, in blood. Then his eyes locked on the table of men in golf jackets. If anyone here feels uncomfortable sharing space with a living legend... He paused. Maybe you're the ones who should eat outside. One man shifted awkwardly. Another stood and left without a word. By the time Jackson turned back to Walter, only 2 remained. Their eyes glued to their coffee, faces red with shame. Walter said nothing. He rarely did. But the corner of his mouth curled into something like a smile. Not a happy one. More like the kind forged from 5 decades of silence. I don't remember deciding to move. Suddenly I was at the door, stepping into the chilly air, a fresh pot of coffee in hand. I poured Walter a cup without speaking, then turned to Jackson. Would you like some too? Yes, ma'am, he said softly, accepting it with both hands like it was a gift. I lingered there, unsure what to say. Then I reached into my apron pocket and pulled out a folded paper. I'd kept it since morning, a note from my grandfather's old field journal. Inside, a photo, 2 young men in jungle gear grinning beside a rusted truck. One was Grandpa James. The other? A dagger and anchor tattoo on his wrist. I laid the photo gently on the table. Walter froze. His eyes scanned the image, then looked up at me. For a second, something shifted in his expression, like he recognized a piece of his past. What was your grandfather's name? He asked, his voice nearly a whisper. James Harrington, I said. Walter leaned back and exhaled deeply. He once told me, first burgers on him when we got home. I smiled gently. He always said you were the reason they made it back. Walter stared at the photo, then looked into my eyes. You have his eyes. A lump rose in my throat. Jackson remained silent, knowing this wasn't his moment. Then, without asking, he stood, lifted his phone, and took one single photo. Walter, the tattoo, the coffee, the old photo. Me standing quietly beside them. A frozen moment on an ordinary Sunday morning in a forgettable town. But Jackson knew what he was doing. By nightfall, that image would be everywhere. And for the first time in decades, people would see Walter Reed. Not just the man, but everything he represented. By Monday morning, the photo had exploded online. Not because it was edited, not because it was staged, but because it was real. A young Navy SEAL saluting an old man with a faded tattoo. A cup of coffee between them. A photograph of war, of memory, and of loyalty. A waitress in tears beside them. The caption was simple. Some heroes don't wear uniforms anymore. But some still carry the mission. I didn't even know Jackson had posted it. But the internet worked faster than memory. Faster than shame. Suddenly, Walter Reed wasn't just a forgotten name. He was remembered. Local news was first, then regional. By midweek, camera crews were outside Grant's diner. Todd, the same manager who sent Walter outside, ducked interviews like a virus. But me? I talked. I told them what I saw, what I felt. And when they asked who Walter Reed was, I didn't list his medals. I said, he's the kind of man who never asked for anything, and deserves everything. And from there, it all unfolded. Letters started arriving, at first just a few, mostly from veterans. I served in Nam. I remember G7. My dad used to talk about a man with a dagger tattoo. I think your Walter saved my uncle. Then came letters from school kids. Crooked handwriting, taped up envelopes, crayon drawings, a smiling old man with a tattoo. One note said, Dear Mr. Reed, my grandpa cried when he saw your picture. He said you're why he came home. Walter didn't know what to do with them. He brought them in, handed me the stack. You'll know what to do, he said. I copied them, framed a few, pinned one to the bulletin board with a note. If you know Walter, say thank you. The next morning, someone left flowers at his usual patio table. No card, just a daisy and a napkin. It read, We see you now. Walter grumbled when the kids showed up with paint buckets and ladders, but he let them. A week later, someone replaced the squeaky front gate. Then the roof got patched. 2 veterans pulled up one morning, unloaded a new set of tools, and simply said, Figured you could use these. He never asked for any of it. He just nodded, thanked them quietly, and went right back to work. Because that's who he was. By late spring, the mayor made an announcement. A plaque was going up at City Hall. Not a statue, not a speech, just a marker, simple and permanent, right beside the flagpole. The inscription read, Honor the quiet ones. The ones who bore weight we never saw, the ones who walked alone so others could come home. At the bottom, etched into steel, was a familiar symbol. A dagger through an anchor. Walter stood there during the unveiling. Said nothing. Just touched the cool metal with his fingers and gave the faintest nod. His eyes were glassy, but he didn't cry. He didn't need to. Then came a day none of us expected. Walter's 85th birthday. He didn't want a party. Said all he needed was black coffee and dry toast. But life had other plans. Just before 9, I heard it. A low rumble in the distance. Tires crunching on gravel. I stepped outside the diner as 3 black SUVs and 2 Humvees pulled up in front of his shop. 7 young men stepped out, sharp haircuts and polished boots, dressed in full navy blues. And then came one more. Sarah Harrington, my cousin, my best friend, and the granddaughter of James Harrington. She was holding a folded flag and a small wooden box. Walter came out wiping his hands with a rag. confused at first, then he saw her. Recognition softened the lines on his face. "Hi," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "You probably don't remember me." "I do," Walter replied. "You've got your grandfather's eyes." She smiled, already crying. "We came to honor your birthday and to say thank you." One by one, the SEALs stepped forward. Each saluted. No speeches, no ceremony, just quiet reverence. They handed him the box, and inside was a medallion from the Navy SEAL Historical Foundation. His name, his designation, and below it, "For service above silence." Walter held it in both hands like it might disappear. His voice broke when he whispered, "I thought they forgot." Sarah reached for his hand. "We never did." For a long moment, no one moved. No wind, no sound, just stillness. And then Sarah leaned closer. "He'd be proud, you know," she said. "My grandfather, he'd be proud to see you remembered." Walter looked at her, tears welling up. "He was the best of us." "So were you," she answered. And in that instant, he looked young again, like the weight of decades had lifted. The last man carrying a promise was no longer carrying it alone. That week, the mayor brought a motion to the city council. Quietly, without ceremony, they renamed the road where Walter's shop stood. Not after a mayor, not after a businessman, but after a man who never asked for his name to be known. 3 weeks later, a simple white sign went up. "Silent Service Way, in honor of Walter Reed, SEAL Team Bravo." Honor the quiet ones. No ribbon cutting, just a small flag planted at the base. Walter wouldn't have wanted a spotlight. He kept working after that. Slower, sure. Age catching up. But still sharp, still steady. Neighbors dropped by more often. Not just for oil changes, but for conversation. Kids brought drawings. Veterans brought photos. And sometimes, if you caught him in the right mood, Walter would talk. Never bragging, never dramatic. Just honest. Like the time a medevac was 3 minutes late and he carried a man through smoke and silence across a field of fire. He never called it heroism, just finishing the job. And that's how Walter lived, until he didn't. 3 years later, on a crisp September morning, the town flags were lowered to half-mast. Walter Reed passed away in his sleep. No pain, no final words, just quiet. The diner closed early. The high school canceled classes. By noon, the little white church on the hill was already surrounded. They came, in boots and uniforms, jeans and choir robes, hats in hand. Some hadn't buttoned a dress coat in decades, but they came. They came because they knew. Even if Walter never told his story out loud. The funeral was quiet, just like him. No slideshow, no long speeches, just one slow song. 6 active duty SEALs, including Jackson Miles, flew in from across the country to carry him home. Sarah sat in the front row, clutching the same photograph. Walter and her grandfather standing together in jungle gear. At the gravesite, she laid it on the casket and whispered, "You kept the promise for both of you." His headstone said only this, beneath his name and the years. He never asked for recognition. His silence saved lives. The diner still serves the veteran special every Sunday, but that corner table stays empty now. A small plaque bolted to the wood reads, "Reserved in memory of Walter Reed, SEAL Team Bravo, G7. Some men carry the mission long after the war ends." Tourists ask who he was. Locals just smile and point to the street sign outside, "Silent Service Way." Because in this town we remember, not with parades or spotlights, but with action, with gratitude, with a coffee cup, a folded photo, and a name carried quietly in the hearts of those he helped. And maybe, just maybe, the rest of us remember too. In our darkest moments, kindness still finds a way, often in the quietest places. Not everyone who saves a life wants credit. Sometimes they just need to know someone isn't forgotten. And that is enough. Subscribe to Unbox Story, where quiet heroes are remembered, where justice lives in everyday kindness, and where no act of silent service is ever left behind.